In a world where women were often silenced, one man changed everything.
Welcome to today's video, where we'll uncover how Jesus Christ redefined the role of women in a patriarchal society. Through his revolutionary interactions and teachings, Jesus uplifted women, empowering them in ways that were radical for his time. Let's dive in.
To truly grasp the significance of Jesus' actions, we need to understand the cultural context. In first-century Jewish society, women were often seen as second-class citizens. They were restricted from participating in public religious life, could not testify in legal matters, and were largely confined to domestic roles. Education was primarily reserved for men, and women's opinions and contributions were often dismissed. Marriage and motherhood defined their social value, and their lives were tightly controlled by male authority figures. Imagine a world where women's voices were systematically silenced, where their access to spiritual teachings was limited, and where societal norms reinforced their inferiority. It's against this backdrop of inequality and marginalization that Jesus emerged with a message and example that would challenge the status quo. In this patriarchal system, hope for gender equity seemed distant. But Jesus' actions and teachings were not just countercultural, they were revolutionary. Jesus' ministry was filled with moments that broke cultural norms. Let's look at a few key examples that demonstrate how he treated women with dignity and respect. In John 4, Jesus speaks to the Samaritan woman at the well. This encounter is groundbreaking for multiple reasons. First, Jews and Samaritans had a long history of hostility, and it was socially unacceptable for a Jewish man to speak to a Samaritan. Second, the fact that he engaged in a public and meaningful theological discussion with a woman defied societal norms. Jesus revealed his identity as the Messiah to her, demonstrating that spiritual truths were not reserved for men alone. This encounter led the woman to become one of the first evangelists, bringing others to hear Jesus. In John 8, a woman caught in adultery is dragged before Jesus. The crowd demands her execution, but Jesus responds with profound wisdom.
Let him who is without sin cast the first stone.
By refusing to condemn her, Jesus not only saves her life, but also challenges the double standards of the time, where women were often punished more harshly than men for the same offenses. In Luke 10, we see Mary of Bethany taking the position of a disciple, sitting at Jesus' feet to learn from him. In a culture where only men were permitted to be disciples of rabbis, Jesus' affirmation of Mary's choice was revolutionary. He tells her sister Martha, who was focused on traditional domestic duties, that Mary has chosen what is better. This act emphasized that women were equally entitled to spiritual growth and education. Each of these encounters shows us a consistent pattern. Jesus valued women as individuals, broke societal barriers, and welcomed them into roles previously denied to them. Part 3, Women in Jesus' Ministry.
Women weren't just passive observers in Jesus' ministry. They were active participants, playing critical roles in his mission.
Luke chapter 8 highlights the presence of women like Mary Magdalene, Joanna and Susanna who supported Jesus' ministry financially. This is significant because it demonstrates their independence and the trust Jesus placed in them to steward resources for his mission. Mary Magdalene, in particular, became one of Jesus' most devoted followers, later playing a pivotal role in the resurrection story.
Perhaps the most striking example of women's involvement is found in the resurrection narrative. All 4 Gospels highlight women as the first witnesses to the empty tomb. In a society that dismissed women's testimony as unreliable, Jesus deliberately chose women to be the first to proclaim the news of his resurrection. Mary Magdalene, often referred to as the apostle to the apostles, was entrusted with this monumental message, signaling the equal worth of women in spreading the gospel.
It's remarkable to consider that the cornerstone of the Christian faith, the resurrection, was first entrusted to women. Their courage and faithfulness laid the foundation for the spread of the gospel.
The impact of Jesus' example continued in the early church, where women like Priscilla, Phoebe, and Lydia emerged as leaders, teachers, and hosts of early Christian communities. Their contributions remind us that women have always been essential to God's work.
Part 4. Jesus' teachings on equality. Jesus' teachings consistently elevated women. In Matthew chapter 19, Jesus speaks against easy divorce laws that left women vulnerable, emphasizing the sanctity of marriage and protecting women from being discarded. This teaching upheld the dignity of women in a society where they were often treated as property. In Mark chapter 14, Jesus defends a woman who anoints him with expensive perfume, saying her act will be remembered wherever the gospel is preached. This was more than a defense. It was a public acknowledgement of her faith and devotion. By honoring her act, Jesus gave her dignity and a lasting legacy, breaking societal norms that often minimized women's contributions. In Luke chapter 18, Jesus shares the parable of the persistent widow, who repeatedly petitions a judge until her request is granted. This story highlights the power of perseverance and faith, using a woman as the example of what it means to pray and never give up. By featuring women in his parables, Jesus underscored their equal importance in God's kingdom. Time and again, Jesus used his teachings and actions to challenge the status quo and affirm the equal worth of women. These lessons continue to resonate today, reminding us that every individual has value in God's eyes.
Part 5. The legacy of Jesus' example. Jesus set a precedent for how women should be valued and treated with dignity, respect, and equality. The early church followed his lead. Women like Priscilla, Phoebe, and Lydia played vital roles in spreading the gospel. Priscilla, for example, was a teacher and mentor to Apollos, a prominent early church leader. Phoebe is mentioned as a deacon and a benefactor of Paul's ministry, trusted to deliver his letter to the Romans, a critical task in early Christianity. Lydia was a successful businesswoman who hosted one of the first Christian communities in her home. Today, we see the legacy of Jesus' example in countless ways. Women serve as pastors, missionaries, teachers, and advocates for social justice. The foundation laid by Jesus' actions and teachings continues to inspire movements for equality and the recognition of every person's worth. From the first century church to the present day, Jesus' treatment of women has left an indelible mark. His example challenges us to stand against inequality and to affirm the dignity of every person.
Conclusion: what this means for us. So, what does this mean for us? Jesus' interactions with and teachings about women challenge us to value and uplift one another, regardless of gender. In a world still grappling with inequality, his example shines as a beacon of hope and justice. If you found this video inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content exploring the life and teachings of Jesus. Let's continue the conversation in the comments. What story about Jesus and women inspires you the most? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.